Welcome to the Six Hats podcast, where I, Dr. Shami, a lifestyle and nutritional medicine family doctor, will talk about how women strive to find balance each day by juggling their six roles, being a woman, mother, daughter, partner, business owner, and professional. Hello, everyone, and we're back in season 2, and so excited to have Cristina Cooper back again. And so in today's talk, we decided to talk about female orgasm. Now, I'm going to really start by saying, when was the last time you actually had a conversation about it? I can't remember. I remember not even being taught about it in med school, even when we studied gynecology. We don't even talk about it as females or girlfriends meeting up. So, Cristina, welcome. We're going to dive into female orgasm. How are you doing?
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for asking me back. I'd love to talk about these things. And last time I talked about female orgasm was actually this morning.
Great.
And it was also yesterday. So I feel it's pretty present in my field at the moment. And I love talking about these things, which are, often held as taboo, but we just need more information about. We often don't have much education about these things. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the best place to start is just actually defining female orgasm.
So this is interesting. Like there have been many studies on female orgasm, and currently it's defined really as this peak experience. And it's kind of like, I would say every orgasm is different, and everyone experiences their orgasms differently as well. So often people are chasing a particular thing that they have in mind that they think they need to achieve, and that it looks a certain way. And that sort of misses other potential orgasms or steps along the way, or even creating the space for an orgasm to kind of happen. So, we might talk a little bit about female anatomy, if that's okay,
yeah,
just for listeners out there. So, I would say that most vulva owners have experienced, if they experience orgasm, are most familiar with clitoral orgasm. And not everyone has experienced orgasm. Some people are anorgasmic. They may be on a journey on their pathway to looking to discover orgasm. And I just want to reassure them they're not alone, that it's actually not that uncommon for people for vulva owners not to have experienced orgasm. And it's a matter of, if they're not broken and there's nothing wrong with them, it's mainly like a skill like anything that can be learned. So I encourage those people to not feel shame about reaching out to a practitioner. It might be an intimacy coach like me, or a GP, or a sexological body worker. So clitoral orgasm is the one that we're most familiar with. And this is, for stimulating the clitoris, reaching a peak, and then having a peak experience. I guess what I'm having in mind is that there are also different nerves involved. So you have so the clitoris itself has got something like over 5,000 nerve endings. So it's really the organ of pleasure. It's not designed for anything else. It doesn't have any other function other than pleasure. And how amazing is that? To have an organ just dedicated to pleasure. And then there's different nerves which are then involved in the vagina and the rest of the vulval area. And so you can actually experience different kinds of orgasm with the two different nerves being involved. So we might experience clitoral orgasms generally sort of as a, wonderful and kind of short-lasting peak experience. And by the way, there's no bad orgasm. There's no right way to have an orgasm. In certain spiritual communities, there might be a thought about, clitoral orgasm, that's not great. You have to be heading for the cervix. That's the true transformational spiritual pathway, etc. I really think there's no bad orgasms out there. But just so there's clitoral orgasm. There's also G-spot orgasm. So G-spot's a bit of a misnomer because it's not a spot. It's not like there's an on-off button. You kind of press that and then it just sort of, ping. It's actually the name. It's better known these days, really better name for it is the urethral crest. So this is the whole of the spongy tissue on the front wall of the vagina through which the urethra runs. And G just stands for the abbreviation of the first letter of the guy who kind of discovered this area. But like I say, we've done ourselves a great disservice by thinking there's just one spot, because people are looking for the spot rather than realizing it's the whole of the urethral crest, which can be delightfully delicious and highly orgasmic. And so this tissue, these are erectile tissues within the vagina, the urethral sponge, and also there is a perirectal sponge. So on the back wall of the vagina, in between the front hole and the back hole, between the vagina and the anus, there's the perineum. This is just the soft skin part outside, but just inside, there's a spongy tissue there with a perirectal sponge. And this also becomes engorged during arousal, when there's excitation. In the same way that penis owners, their penises become engorged and erect with the same kind of erectile tissue. So these spongy tissues can become engorged as the person becomes more aroused, and then you can also then experience orgasm in these places, and they're quite different. So often people who own urethral sponges, so I'm being careful with these terminology because I want to get away from like naming someone their gender just from their sexual apparatus, because we might, we might identify quite differently depending on our felt sense of who we are, our identity. So that's why I'm choosing my words quite carefully. It might sound quite clunky, so sorry about that. So there might be arousal from the urethral sponge and front wall, and that can lead to orgasm, a so-called G-spot orgasm. And this is often felt as like a deeper inside kind of experience in the clitoral. And for many folks with urethral sponges, it can be quite an emotional experience as well. So that the perirectal sponge also can have around orgasms there. That's called a P-spot orgasm. Further up inside the vagina, behind the urethral sponge, just in front of the cervix, this is called the anterior spots. You can also have anterior spot orgasms from there. And P-spot posterior, that's immediately behind the anterior spots. It's like opposite side of the wall. And the perirectal sponge, this is the Kundalini spot. Also, there are cervical orgasms. Again, there's a different kind of nerves involved in the whole of the cervix. The whole womb can go into contraction. And so this can be felt again as a sort of deeper sensation inside. And for some people, it might be like a rolling, thunderous experience. Other people, it might be really quite calm or tranquil, but more of a sort of spiritual connection, a sense of oneness. There's all sorts of different kinds of orgasms, and they can all be blended. So the joy of joys to be able to experience all these things. So there's that kind of world of all potential of orgasms out there, and I want to reassure people who perhaps never experienced any of them or only experienced a clitoral orgasm, and perhaps pretty mind-blowing that there are other types, is that again, there's nothing broken with you. They're just skills that we can kind of learn. And I work with a lot of women or folks who identify with women with vulvas who experience numbness. This is like super common. So numbness, is in fact a sensation. It's like a block. And there's often really strong emotional blocks or like emotional withdrawing that can lead to a pattern of numbness. And this might be because perhaps the vagina has been penetrated when the vulva owner is not ready to be penetrated. Either not necessarily because it's non-consensual, but maybe because they just physically weren't ready. It takes, generally on average, 40 minutes for the whole area to really become engorged and ready for penetration. And most people, especially if you watch movies and how they make love in movies, it's just kind of like, oh, here we go, and then we're in. Rather than actually waiting for things to be ready for adequate lubrication, for relaxation of the pelvic floor. And all of this has to come from a felt sense of safety in that area. So if we've overridden our boundaries, if we push through because of some performance idea, because of the way we're thinking that we should be in our body rather than just feeling our body, then naturally that can lead to some shutdown. And, and not to feel bad about shutdown, or no judgment about it either, and no shame, because it's just, okay, noticing, okay, shutdown is present, there's numbness here, and I'd like to reassure anybody out there that, you can work through these things and de-armor the whole area. I mean, I came definitely from a place of deep shutdown. So, I know firsthand that it can feel like an impossible task to be working through these issues. But having faith and keeping up with the practice, magically it just happens.
Wow.
So, and it just takes time. And often, it's not necessarily to the agenda of our mind about, this should be, it's not like it's working to a particular timetable that we can control with our mind. It's really, listening to our body, allowing our body to open and flower, allowing it in the tantric sense of dropping into our deep feminine essence, not in a kind of gender binary sense, but just in a kind of opening yin state of allowing ourselves to drop into our natural essence in order to flourish. So orgasms, generally require that we feel relaxed and, we drop out of our head into our body. So it's our body that's experiencing the orgasm. Our mind might be certainly involved with setting up the circumstances and our arousal patterns, But then the more we feel in our body, the more we'll be connected to the body, the more we'll be able to then navigate what our body needs in that moment to more deeply open. I guess one of the things that it's all about creating the opportunity for orgasms to come, and then they'll show up.
I love how you described the anatomy and explained it all, because that's literally the first time I'm really thinking about it in that way. And I can't emphasize enough, like, where do we get our sex education from? And also, where do we get the influences from? And you've made a really good point. It's so easy to look at movies and expect that that's what we're looking for. And often people can describe it. They may not come to a GP seeking for advice, but they may describe it in so many other forms of maybe low mood or anxious or low libido. So it can come across in different ways.
Yeah, or pain during sex, and thinking that there's something broken about them, there's something wrong. And, us with our doctor brain, we'll also want to make sure that there's not some serious pathology there. And then it's all about asking the right questions, really asking more about it, what people mean, what their expectations are, and are they taking time. I agree about the educational thing. Like, it's really poor. Most people have their education from sex ed at school, where it might be all about condoms and bananas and terrible diseases you might have, and God forbid you get pregnant. All this kind of, some, having spoken to a teacher friend of mine lately, there's definitely more education around consent, boundaries, and all this, and communication. So I'm hoping that will shift, and we shift. And there's definitely a big movement around shifting the taboos around sex and sexuality. So and I would say that there's more opportunities for people to be educated these days than there ever was when we were kids. And good TV programs like Sex Education on Netflix is awesome.
That's true.
It's really great. Like, it's awesome. Because actually it's raising awareness that people can ask questions about these things. It's okay, and that there are questions to be asked, rather than just accepting the information and not even knowing that there's a different way of doing things or a different possibility.
Absolutely. And I was reading somewhere about the benefits of orgasm on your health.
Yeah.
Could you dive into that a bit further?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's regulating the nervous system, hormonal balance, vibrancy, and, also making love is good cardio. Like, it's good for your heart rate and stuff. And being in intimate connection with someone is incredibly nurturing for our nervous system. And that itself, lowers stress. It's going to lower long-term consequences of stress, like blood pressure, issues, heart disease, and all these things. So I'm really, for us to feel deeply nourished. And at the same time, not chasing after orgasm. So as I said, it's all really about making the space for that and that nurturing, whether it's with a partner or just with oneself. And then orgasms will come naturally over time. So not getting caught up in the stress mindset of like, I need to have an orgasm now either. Because the more we chase after something, we more tighten up, and that actually makes it less available to us. So again, it's important to relax, to regulate the nervous system, and then the things come without being attached to them. It's like many things in life, like, opening a space for good things to come, but not being attached to them, wanting to show up.
And so if someone is seeking more information, you did mention, coming to see someone like you in terms of intimacy coaching, but are there any other resources, or what first steps can they take?
Yeah, there are, I would say, just acknowledging where they're at with the body. That's the very first step. Okay, what is actually happening here, and how do I feel about it? And then are things work? And then, because often there are quite a lot of feelings we haven't allowed ourselves to feel. If we're really present with those feelings, we often get the guidance that we need. So it's sort of commonly there is quite a lot of grief, perhaps around, for example, vulva owners who identify as women who have not engaged sexually with themselves or another person for quite a while, and it's kind of been out of their mindset, and they've perhaps had low libido, and they've kind of cast it aside. So they can often, and that could be totally fine, and they're cool with it, but often had these people come to me who've been, quite a lot of grief around that whole thing. So just acknowledging where we're at and being able to just feel all the feelings around it is really step one. Because then you can acknowledge where you're at without making it a kind of problem. More like, okay, is this working for me at the moment? I can acknowledge exactly how I am in this moment. I'm willing I'm ready and willing to engage in having a different relationship with myself, with my body, and being willingness to listen more deeply. So I would say that would be just step one. And then things will show up, whether it's seeing an intimacy coach, whether it's listening to podcasts, whether it's seeing a sexological body worker, whether it's seeing a GP, just get checked out to make sure there's no pathology there, no separate from all of that. I'm a strong believer that the universe can provide and manifest the things as long as we have made a request and made the question in an open-hearted, non-attached way. So again, that's a sort of more philosophical kind of approach. But I would say that's step one. And educating yourself on like anatomy can be really helpful. So there's a brilliant course, a little course online, which can be purchased. I'm just checking my brain's gone blank. She's a wonderful educationist, Cindy Darnell. So she has a wonderful online kind of anatomy thing called Anatomy of Arousal, which can be purchased. And she's explaining everything, shows models, like to explain how the process works. So that's a great resource for finding out more. Then many de-armoring online programs, that self-cervix is one. I haven't used personally, but I've had good feedback from people who've used that.
I thought that's a great place to start. And I'm quite curious, Cristina, what can they expect when they come and see an intimacy coach?
Okay, well, firstly, it's talking. So to start with, it's talking and understanding what's going on with the person in their life, because everything has when we're engaging with ourselves with intimacy, we need to understand where we're at. And so intimacy isn't all about sex. It's really about connecting with oneself and then understanding one's own compass. So that makes sense. So it would be talking and understanding where they're at, what are the particular goals that they're hoping to achieve, what they want to bring into their life. And so it kind of touches on many aspects of life because of that. Sex and sexuality, this is often where we hide our, it's a taboo subject. It's often where we hide our unawareness. So anything we don't really want to deal with kind of, it's hidden within our taboos. And as soon as we take ownership over what we find taboo, over the things that we've not been willing to look at, as we take things out of unawareness into awareness, we're bringing light on these things, which means that it then touches on every aspect of our life. So if we're not able, for example, to own our desires in the bedroom, how can we fully own our desires in the boardroom? So I mean, because there's always some aspect of a part of us feeling ashamed, and that will kind of show up in different aspects. So people come for all different reasons. They might be wanting, for example, to work through shame, or they might just be wanting education, more information. They might have numbness or blockage and want to work through that. They might have issues around what's going on with them in their partnership, with whatever configuration that might be. And so often it's a fact-finding and relational aspects. So part of working with intimacy is also regulating the nervous system. So for me, it's like what's most important in the beginning is really rapport and cultivating an environment of safety. Because without that, actually, no work is possible.
So true.
And there might be different practices then. There might be meditations, different practices they will do on their own. So they wouldn't, for example, involve any nudity on screen or anything like that. If anyone's kind of wondering about it, it's a coaching space, and then with practices to do by themselves. There might be like off-camera just movement or something, like do movement practices where people just feel like they're in their body. And I like to have camera on, so we're kind of meeting each other with face-to-face. In the beginning, so we can get a scope of each other. It's also helpful then for some just breathing meditations and things. But some people are not comfortable being seen on camera, and that's totally fine. Then they just work with just voice. So it's very unique. It's more like a boutique service for what everyone requires, and everyone's coming for different things. Everyone has a different journey. And there may be, sometimes people might also need outward referral. There might be other things that are really helpful for them to do, or maybe they need to also see their GP about something. Maybe they need to see their nutritionist about something, maybe they need to see a pelvic floor physiotherapist. There's some sorts of things. So that's the kind of general scope. But generally, like when I'm starting with a client, have a clarity call first, just to make sure that we're a really good fit and we're on the same page, and that I can really provide the service they're looking for, because maybe they're maybe they're requiring something else or looking for something other than what I'm offering.
Yeah, I think that was a really good summary and just gives an idea for people to decide which avenue they want to take. And I have to say, to be honest, GPs do not have the time to explore in a normal consult, or may not have the expertise. And that's where someone like you, Cristina, intimacy coaching is just ideal, because it takes time to have that conversation and dive deeper. But of course, ruling out pathology is something GPs do all the time, but this could be a secondary pathway for people looking.
Exactly. And the time, it takes time for us to feel settle in another system in order to then have those conversations. And as you say, I think many GPs are just not confident really about asking particular questions, or they're worried about embarrassing the patient, or and that might be because they have some of their own unresolved things in themselves around sexuality, so they find it difficult to talk about. So,
that's absolutely.
Yeah, so a lot of compassion for everyone around.
Thank you so much, Cristina. I think that was a brilliant start and a brilliant beginner's guide to exploring more into orgasm. And I love those resources, and I'll actually write it in the show notes as well, so people can look them up in terms of access to other information. Thank you so much for your time, Cristina. And of course, we will be back, I'm sure.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you for having me. It's great fun, as always.
Remember that this is general advice only. Please see your healthcare professional for more information. So what's your take-home message today? Remember, it's all about progress and not perfection. And are you suffering from stress? Visit Usawa Learning Hub on usawa.com.au and sign up for the 6-week challenge on how to reduce stress today. Enjoy the journey.